Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. My name is Christopher Garner. And number one, I want to thank all of you all for the opportunity of being here to present our topic to today. So currently, I am the academic support coordinator slash career development coordinator for the leadership and learning organizations within Peabody College here at Vanderbilt University. And I'll pass it over to my colleagues.
Hey, everybody. My name is Matthew Campbell. I am a senior lecturer in the online EDD that Chris mentioned. I'm also our capstone director in the program. So I have a keen interest in these topics. And though I work at Vanderbilt, I actually live in Florence, Alabama. So you've got a fellow Alabamian on here with you.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Lynn Altamirano. I'm super excited to be here. Just a little bit about me. I've actually been active duty in the Army for the last 13 years, going on 14 years. And in the last 2.5 years, I'm actually a student at Peabody College, Vanderbilt. So I've been juggling a full-time job as well as a full-time doctoral student within the program. So for kind of me being here today to kind of balance out the perspectives, I'm offering that real-time student perspective. So you're going to hear real stories and actual real takes based on our topic, which is intrusive advising. So excited to be here. Without further ado, Dr. Garner, take it away.
All right. Perfect. Perfect.
And while Chris is getting that up, I would love, just so that we can get a sense of who is in our session, if you could just pop into the chat box, even just what you do, maybe where you're located, that would be incredibly helpful for us. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Okay, so today our topic is relationship building and student success strategies for our graduate adult learners. So for the overview, here's what we're going to do. We've already introduced ourselves, but we're going to talk about intrusive advising theory, who are graduate adult learners. We're going to have an initial reflection. We're going to talk about the challenges for graduate adult learners. We're going to also talk about creating sustainable relationships. We're also going to talk about the neuroscience of motivation for graduate adult learners. Then we're going to have the student perspective, and then we'll get into a little bit of Q&A. A little bit more about myself. So I have been doing this work for over 10 years now, so more so 11 years per se. And so I've always done work with graduate level adult learners. And so it became apparent to me that there are a lot of strategies out there when it comes to our students on the undergrad level on making sure that they have everything that they need, right? But I did notice that there is a gap in research and literature when it comes to dealing with our graduate slash professional students. Because let's be honest, just because you've made it to a graduate level program as well as a doctoral level program or some type of professional program, you haven't arrived, because you still need someone in your corner making sure that you're good, making sure that you have all of the resources necessary. So this is something that the three of us are very passionate about when it comes to this. So when we think about it, it is very critical for those of us who work in higher education to become intentional about student success through relationship building. Because honestly, that's where it starts. The question then arises, how can one build an authentic and sustainable working relationship with a graduate level adult learner? And then we're going to think about what are some ways to maintain these authentic working relationships until graduation. One of the things when I'm talking with students, no matter what level they're on, I never say finish your program, because the goal is to always graduate, because you can finish at any point. But the graduation piece is also going to help you remember your why, and it's going to also get you across the stage. So one of the ways that you can do that by building that relationship is through intrusive advising. So you'll see here that Jennifer Varney wrote that intrusive advising involves intentional contact with students with the goal of caring and beneficial relationship that leads to increased academic motivation and persistence. She went on to say that intrusive advising differs from the traditional prescriptive and developmental models where you're waiting for the student to reach out to you. Because now the advisors are not only helpful and encouraging of students, but they, watch this, proactively make the initial contact. So in other words, we as advisors, student support services, we are not waiting for the student to contact us, but rather we are reaching out to the students directly in an attempt to address any needs that they may have. All right.
And Chris, I think something interesting to overlay in this is we all have experience in the online EDD program. So that's where we're all coming to you from. That's our context. And so our students are spread out geographically all over the world. I mean, Lynn, in your cohort, people are across the United States and every which way. And so while that's true, that is not that cannot be an inhibitor for advising. And so that's something I know that Chris has worked for the last several years, is making his program specifically tailored to those unique identities. And so as we're going through this, and I'll throw it to Lynn in a moment, think about how your context overlays on top of this, because that's one thing that's going to ribbon throughout our presentation is the value of identity and the value of context in making these relationships real.
And then, of course, from the student perspective, right? So Dr. Campbell brings up a really good point. We're all at different places, typically different places in our career. We have different things going on in our lives. And our needs are going to be different. Me personally, it's kind of like not necessarily a good thing, but I feel very uncomfortable sometimes reaching out for help, especially when I was in my undergrad. It was different because I was new. It was expected that I did reach out to people. But as somebody who's going back to school many, many years later after my undergrad, which was in 2007, it was just like, do I really need to reach out? Is it okay if I reach out? And then when you're in a hybrid program, because you don't even have face-to-face interactions, or if you do, they're very, very rare, it's even harder to reach out to somebody and to feel comfortable and not feel like you are yourself intruding upon their time. Like, am I overstepping my boundaries because, they're my professor or they're advising, but their parameters are very strict. So having them reach out to us kind of opens that door, extends that olive branch, and says, oh, it is okay that I ask these questions, even as adults, because we're so used to doing things on our own at this point in time and being very, very independent. So it's helpful to know that they're willing to do that and start that conversation.
Absolutely. Excellent points. Excellent points added. And so when we also continue the conversation about intrusive advising, it's also known as proactive advising. Okay. This was something that was introduced back in 1975. So it says that proactive advising theory blends advising and counseling into one discipline. And through the work of a group of voluntary faculty members, they began the development of this theory. Also, then it recommends that proactive advising theory as a deliberate, structured student intervention at the first indication of academic difficulty in order to motivate the student to seek help. So one of the things I do currently in my role, so every now and then I will check with professors to see how students are doing. If someone is struggling, that's a time for me to reach in to have some intervention measures just to talk. And a lot of times you might not even talk about academics. Like you'll ask questions about academics, but you might find out that there might be some difficulty going on within their lives personally. And sometimes that student just needs to talk through that. And sometimes that makes the world of difference. I literally had a student this weekend because one of the things that we have within our program is convening, as Dr. Campbell mentioned earlier. And one of the students came up to me and said, Dr. Garner, if it wasn't for you, I would not be here today. Only because we had a real conversation and we sat and talked about what she currently was going through, right? So, again, this whole thing of coming and not waiting on the student is very, very important when it comes to building relationships with students. So, proactive advising involves deliberate intervention to enhance student motivation, using strategies to show interest and involvement with students, intensive advising designed to increase the probability of student success, and working to educate students on all options and approaching students before situations develop. Okay. With these actions, this is where the relationship between the advisor and the students begins to form. Because in my experiences, and at several different higher education institutions I have worked at, I've noticed that I was able to build a bond, as I mentioned a moment ago. Sometimes, even through discussing academics, policies, and procedures, we sometimes begin to talk about life within itself. A lot of times, I tell students life is going to continue to life. So I often say to students that you can consider me as your friend. And as your friend, I am here to make sure that you are good and you have all the resources necessary. Now, as your friend, I will hold you accountable, right? Be honest with you, but you will at least have somebody that will be a listening ear when times get rough. So when we talk about the graduate adult learner, this is somebody who more than likely works full time, financially independent, meaning that they're not depending on mom and dad anymore. Also, who are 24 years or older and responsible for a family. and are at least 10 years post-bachelor's.
Hey, real quick, Dr. Garner. So literally, this is me right here. Every single one of these. Now, I actually just had my 40th birthday, so I'm definitely beyond that 24-year-old mark. In terms of family, a lot of people forget that the term family is very, very diverse, right? So I don't have family in the what I guess we consider the traditional sense in this regard, like having a spouse and children. But I am responsible for caring for a disabled sibling. And so this is something in addition to my regular responsibilities. And I can tell you when some of my professors have reached out to me because, I'm in the Army, I'm very independent, I'm very disciplined, I'm used to doing things on my own. And them reaching out to me and as Dr. Garner kind of said, like, hey, is everything going okay? Anything, I can help you with, or even just small things that they might notice over time that seem different based on your interactions really, really helps to relieve some of that stress, right? They can't necessarily fix my problems, but them understanding they can kind of help and adjust and be very, very flexible when it comes to that. So these statistics are spot on. And to the point when he talks about lifing, in my cohort alone, a lot of us have experienced untimely deaths of people that are close to us. I had a cohort member, her home burnt down in the first year of our program, and she's still going strong and she is still going to graduate with us. And it was because of the understanding and the intrusive, which I don't particularly like that word, but proactive nature of a lot of the faculty and the professors. We are still here today in this program, getting ready to graduate soon. So statistics are spot on.
Absolutely, Lynn. And that's a great point as well, too, because at the end of the day, and I think you can attest to this, and honestly, all of us can attest to this, graduate adult learners want to know, do I matter? And if I matter, do you care about me? And I could probably end the conversation about this topic right there, because that's honestly where it starts at. Do they matter? And do you care about me as a person?
Just as sort of a pause point here, I see we have a lot of people watching in the lobby. We have participants in here. And so maybe rather than soliciting these, just as a mental model for yourself, as we continue to go through the presentation, I'm going to borrow a thinking routine here from Ron Richhart, who is out of Project Zero, which if you haven't read Making Thinking Visible from Project Zero, it's a lovely book for anyone that's facilitating, especially for adult learners. And the book contains several what the group calls anyway, thinking routines. And so this thinking routine is called Think, Puzzle, Explore. And typically we would generate some responses to this and sort of go through them. But it's also just helpful as a metacognitive strategy for you as an audience member. So as we're going through, I would even invite you on your computer on a Post-it note, get 3 columns of think, puzzle, and explore. And if we can structure your interaction with the content in this way, you're going to be building inferences on multiple levels. So as we're going through this, if there are any initial thoughts that you have about the topic, I would write those down. But really, those last two buckets, I think, are where the real sweet nectar is about puzzles and then explorations that you might want to tackle. So if there are any things about this topic that are curious or interesting to you, note those so that we can chat about them as we wrap up. Or if there are things that you'd like to explore further, we have additional resources that we can share. So as you're going through, we encourage you to continue thinking, to continue puzzling, and to continue exploring.
All right. So there are some challenges out there for graduate adult learner programs. So meaning that just because the student is in this program now, there are some challenges that that program in particular might face. So according to Wallenstein, there are a number of challenges that graduate programs face when it comes to dealing with graduate adult learners. Number one is competition, because again, students can go anywhere, right? Resource limitations. Some graduate programs may not have all the resources necessary to benefit that student. Organizational uncertainty. Sometimes organizations or institutions might not know where does this particular program might fit. And then you also might have a lack of institutional expertise, because this might be a new phenomenon to that institution and they may not know what to do. These are also challenges for the adult learner, because this can have the adverse effect on the adult learner. Because if an institution is not prepared or have the resources necessary to help the graduate student, right, they can then feel like another number, right? They might have this idea of, well, I may not matter, and why am I here? Thus, they can go elsewhere. The next question might be, how do you begin to create and build lasting, authentic relationships? I'm so glad you all asked. So, creating sustainable relationships with graduate adult learners requires a holistic approach by the advisor. Okay. It requires a holistic approach. So, good advising can include the following themes: importance of trust, customer service, programmatic guidance, superior communication, and motivational support. And this can all be accomplished through authenticity. Now, when we talk about authenticity, there should be a requirement of authenticity when it comes to advising students and applies to graduate and professional level students, right? Because if we talk about authenticity, it is defined as what is real, what is genuine, or what is true. Authenticity is also known as a conformity and connection between an entity, a person, place, or time. So you cannot teach authenticity. Being authentic comes from within and having a genuine love and appreciation for what you do. You have to have a passion and love for working with graduate adult learners. If you are not passionate about what you do, it does not take long for students to recognize this about you. Okay. So, in other words, this cannot be a career that this is something that I just fell into. You literally have to be able to want to be able to serve, because it's honestly also servant leadership as well too. So you have to have the authenticity. And as I stated earlier, this is something that you cannot teach. It literally has to come from within. You also have to have programmatic guidance. Okay. Good programmatic advising was conceptualized through the statements referring to the guidance, direction, scheduling, course selection, program assistance, and policy knowledge or paperwork information and support required by the students. So, in other words, you need to know what you're talking about. Right, when it comes to dealing with your students, because they are looking for you to be the experts of the certain programs that they're in. And mind you, you have students that who may not have been in school for over 10, 20 years. So they are looking and coming to you for direction. All right. So this also falls in line with guidance and plans of studies, right? Deadlines, form completion, curriculum, and student concerns. One of the things that you don't want a student to ever say is, I didn't know. So one of the things that you have to do as somebody that's in support services, an advisor, lecturer, professor, is make sure all the resources are there on the front end so they have exactly what they need to succeed. Also, you got to create trust. Trustworthy advising is described as informative, clear, concise, and indicated that is used to provide guidance. So what you say needs to be correct and accurate. Now, you might make a mistake, but be willing to own the mistake and go back and fix it and help the student get back on the right track. Okay. And advisors must work to maintain the advisee's trust and confidence. So if a student comes to you in confidentiality, and depending on what it is, you need to be able to be a place that they can trust, right? Because that's where that relationship building comes into play.
Well, and one thing that we know too about adult learners, and I describe this as a double-edged sword, and the literature would bear this out, is that adult learners have more prior knowledge than a student, a K-12 learner does. That's a good thing because we have more experiences to draw upon. We have a richer catalog with which we can connect with students. However, it can also be a bad thing because students bring with them their identities, their prior experiences into classrooms, into learning experiences. And so that certainly flavors the way that they expect situations to go. And prior knowledge, as we know in learning theory, is one of the most important factors that we can think about when we're approaching a learning environment. And so, Chris, I think so much of what you have to do is to prove your value, to prove your trust to our students before they're willing to engage with you fully. If you didn't do that, it wouldn't happen, or it wouldn't happen nearly as much. Yeah, Lynn.
To piggyback off what you're saying, Dr. Campbell, is for me specifically, I really appreciate you saying that because I pride myself on being a nerd. I love learning. I'm probably going to be in school working on some other degree right after I finish this one. So I definitely understand that. most importantly for me, and I learned this very earlier on in the program, is that the more you continue on in education, especially higher ed, you statistically learn less because you do have so much prior knowledge. So finding ways to apply the little bit of information that you can learn and synthesize that into your life is really important. And sometimes us as students, we don't necessarily see or can make that connection. So part of that value that the professor or the advisor can build for us and really develop that relationship is using and leveraging their own professional experiences and helping us bridge that connection between what we're learning and our life experiences, right? Because we're here to learn and to grow. And if we knew it, we wouldn't really have a reason to be in the program, right? So that's part of that authenticity, right? Is recognizing those personal experiences that you have and helping us make that connection so we place even more value in what we're learning. And of course, that professor or that advisor for making that bridge for us.
Excellent points, you all. Excellent, excellent, excellent. So my final 2 points goes back to individual. So good advisors see each student as an individual and provide personalized advice. They develop relationships with and come to know and understand their advisees. Advisors place students first and not treat it as another number of student. One of my conversations that I have with students, and this has been in each institution I've worked at, is that I tell them I always have time for you. So when I have a student that wants to come in, talk, it depends on the conversation. The conversation can last 10 minutes. The conversation can last 1 hour to 2 hours, right? Now, some people might say, I don't have time for all of that. Well, you should make time for that because you need to make sure that this student is reassured, right? And being able to work through those problems or experiences that they might have, right? I share a lot of personal stories with our students, especially when it comes to this doctoral program. You have students that, this is the first time they've been in the doctoral program, so they might need some assistance in understanding what that might look like, and I've shared stories at times that I might have failed an assignment just to let them know that they're not alone. And again, that begins to create that trust and that builds rapport with the student. And so lastly, at the end, students of advising services and reliance on the advisors, they want to feel important. Okay, they want to feel important. Okay, students believe that advisors who recognize the advisees' perceived value of advising, along with a personal conviction of importance of their role as an advisor, cumulated in good advising. Okay, right? Again, the student needs to know that they matter, and you can do all of this through the role of as a within intrusive advising. All right, and then also you have electronic communication, right? So graduate adult learners identify as good advisor as one who has readily available and willing to communicate frequently through email. Good advising is based on student schedules and address student questions and concerns within 24 to 48 hours. So that goes back to good customer service with the students. All right.
Yeah, here we go. So I wanted to share with you one of my all-time favorite visuals, and I think this is a really lovely heuristic for understanding kind of the how and the why that students approach different learning experiences. I think a key point that we talked about earlier, it's certainly true here, is that student dispositions are entirely context dependent. So they're rarely stable across classes, experiences, or situations. Going back to middle school, I was a teacher at Memphis City Schools for a number of years. And I would have students in a science class that loved it. And then I might see them later on in PE and they might despise it, and vice versa. And we're all the same way in this. We all approach situations in different way. And so if you look at this table, what it's overlaying would be three critical factors or forces in any type of learning situation. First is student perceptions of an environment. So basically, does an adult learner specifically, do they see the environment as being supportive or unsupportive? After that, the value or valence that they put on a particular activity. So I think this is important to me, this is valuable, or perhaps not. And then lastly, their self-efficacy. So their belief in themselves. Essentially, if I put in the appropriate amount of work or energy into this task, I can reasonably expect to be successful. And so as you're looking at this, you can see the myriad ways that these forces combine into making a student have a particular disposition about a class. I'm not going to take you to therapy here, but I want you to think on this for a moment here. So look at this table, and I want you to think back to either a particularly positive or a particularly negative learning experience. And so I'll give you a moment just to sort of think about that. Any level can be recent, can be distant, but I want you to think about how these factors potentially fed into one another and made you experience that environment in that way. For me, I mentioned earlier, I'm from Alabama, so I went to Arab High School in Arab, Alabama. And I would like to think that I was an above average student, but the deeper that I got into high school, the less that I really enjoyed or found value in upper level math. So if we fast forward to my first calculus class, I will protect this person's name. We'll call her Mrs. Reader. I had Mrs. Reader, and long story short, I was terrified of her. I was terrified of the class. I don't really feel like she was a great teacher at the time. She didn't teach a whole lot, and if she did give instruction, it was very terse, very brusque. And I also knew that I wasn't very good at the content. No matter how much I studied, I just thought I wasn't a math guy at the time. And with this being late high school, I knew that I was going to be an English major. So I thought, yeah, this isn't really valuable for me. Why am I doing this? So if we put my experience through this table here, I thought we had a non-supportive environment. I didn't see value in what I was learning, and I didn't think I was very good at what I was doing. So I gutted it out. I despised third block every day, probably even disrupted some people around me because I was in this very rejecting state. And so I'm showing you this table because as we think about adult learners, as we think about supporting them academically, socially, and making sure that they have a place to be in your program, this is a really nice back pocket way to diagnose underperformance from students and to begin to tinker with some of their experiences. The central law of individual or program improvement is this notion that every system is perfectly designed to get the results that it's producing. So if we look at this as a system, we're unhappy with the outcome, tinker with the system, tinker with value, tinker with the environment that students are learning in, see if we can boost students' efficacy. Yeah, Lynn, go ahead.
You know, Dr. Campbell, that's probably one of my favorite things I've heard at Vanderbilt is every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. And I myself in my own organization have echoed this because there's so much truth in it, right? But part of that is understanding how the system works to understand where you can tweak it. And I love this because when we say like creating a supportive environment, it's like, what does that look like, right? We could say, oh, create a supportive environment all day, but what does that mean? So from my experience, from just a student, some of the small things that I noticed in Vanderbilt that I really, really appreciated was something simple as you getting my name correct. So my name is Linda, right? I hate the name Linda. I apologize if there are any in the audience. This is not a stab at you by any means, but I've gotten a lot of jokes growing up with this name. So now it's just kind of like trauma in the back of my mind. But I go by Lynn. And even if it says Linda on my screen, because Zoom has this tendency to automatically put it on there, those professors that remembered, oh, she prefers to go by Lynn, really made an impact to me, right? You respecting my name. And let's be honest, people take it for granted because it's your name, but this is your name. This is something that's going to be with you every step of your life, right? So people getting it right means they respect this part of your identity, whether it's big or whether it's small. Simple stuff like that can feel so supportive and help students feel so seen. Remembering small things about their personality or things that they have a preference for, right? Those things that make us stand out your mind or that you recognize the differences with us makes us feel valued and our perspectives valued. Another thing that I would suggest is, sometimes you can't control who's in your classroom, and you don't necessarily know because different people have different comfort levels with how they express themselves or what they choose to express. So creating environments where you intentionally offer differing viewpoints just to see if anyone feels comfortable enough to speak up is really important, right? Not recycling the same narrative or the same general agreement because it might appear like everyone agrees, but in reality, they might not. And I guarantee you, we don't. But we're just not feeling comfortable. But you have to create that environment. That's a part of that supportive environment for us to speak. Because 100%, we have gotten into some pretty intense conversations in our spaces. And I've loved it because it's really made me value this educational experience. Because we're not having these conversations in other places, and us experiencing them and learning how to have them out in the other places is a different part of the learning experience that you cannot teach in a book. It's got to be created in that environment that Dr. Campbell is talking about. And when you create that environment, it also builds our confidence. It feeds our self-efficacy. So there's so much truth to this, especially what I'm currently and have been experiencing at Vanderbilt.
Appreciate that, Lynn. And Chris, if you want to go ahead and page forward, I wanted to spend a little bit of time here digging into this notion of value. So we said that value is one of those forces that we need to think about and to try to build into students. If you dig into the literature on value, we can understand or parse this simple word in many, many different ways. And so I picked four that I think are particularly important or helpful as we think about adult learners. So looking at subjective value, an easy way to think of this is basically going to be a goal's importance that's determined specifically by an individual. So it's completely idiosyncratic. It's up to them. It's going to vary from person to person. The same person might look at a particular event and find value in it. Others might not. Doesn't mean one is right or one is wrong. It's just their own sort of unique way that they think about a particular item. If you look at attainment value, it's a little bit more prescribed, and this is essentially just the satisfaction that someone gets from the mastery or a mastery of a goal, mastery of a task. So think about someone in Miss Reader's class that enjoyed solving math problems, or somebody that loves playing video games. They enjoy that for the goal of getting it there. Intrinsic value is obviously a bit more personal. Simply just the satisfaction that a learner gains from simply doing the task. So I don't have to get a goal, I don't have to get a badge, I don't have to go to the next level. I might be practicing an instrument, I might be practicing golf, I might be, having some type of hobby that I'm doing. So just the sheer doing of the activity is what I like. And then lastly, and maybe most importantly to a lot of our adult learners, is instrumental value. So the degree to which me doing this activity helps accomplish another goal, likely an extrinsic reward. So I'm going to study because I want to do well on a final. I'm going to attend your certification program because I want a micro-credential. It's going to help me do something else. And so I put these out here for you, and have that yellow reminder at the bottom because I so often forget, what's the point, Matt? Why are we actually talking about this? I think point number one is that values can mutually reinforce each other, or they can work against one another. So let's take an example. We have one student that's super interested in AI applications for their career. So they do enroll in a micro-credential just for the fun of it. So an intrinsic value there. I'm interested in AI. I think this is something that is really intriguing to me. So I'm going to learn more about it. And then I'm going to use that micro-credential hopefully to pursue a redesigned role at work. I'm going to use some of what I've learned there, instrumental value, to further my career along. So that would be an example of things coalescing together. Example two, though, let's say we have a student that has to complete a required course as part of their degree pathway. So that would be attainment value. They want to do well there because it's going to be something that's going to push them further, but they believe that the class in question has no real value, no practical application for them. And so their subjective value would be low, and they're going to be kind of torn between both of those pieces. We know if students have high value, that will lead to interest and motivation. We also know on the other side, if students don't have low value, if we have low values, you're going to get disinterest, you're going to get apathy. And Chris, if you'll page forward to this final slide I wanted to share, we talked about value, but value alone is going to be entirely insufficient to motivate behavior. Value has to be combined with expectancy for us to motivate action. So this is a really simple way that we can think about how value and expectancy interact to hopefully lead to student performance. If you look into the underlying theory here, there's a whole bucket that we could call expectancy theory. And expectancy theory is essentially trying to understand the why of why people do things. Specifically, it's going to have a couple of premises on the table. One, people are motivated to work or to learn when they anticipate success. So if I believe that I can be successful, I'm going to put the appropriate effort in. People are not motivated to work or learn when they don't anticipate success. And people will move if they think it might be a gap, but not a chasm. So if I have to try hard, maybe I'm not good at this yet, but I can, is very different than I have no chance of being successful. And as Chris has mentioned, as Lynn has mentioned, adult graduate learners are unique. They have their own complicated lives beyond your program or beyond the learning experience. And so even if we further dug into different expectancies, we can understand those in a variety of ways. Outcome expectancies. So my belief that my actions are going to get me a specific outcome, which could be positive or negative, or even efficacy expectancies, that I'm actually capable of doing well. So I say all that to say, if we think about student motivation, which is what we all want in our programs, we want people to do well, we want them to flourish. We have to have positive expectancies and we have to have some source of value. When those things combine, we get motivated behavior, which is going to allow us then to direct students toward goals. And which at that time you can also overlay feedback here. Feedback must be in reference to some type of goal. And then that's hopefully going to allow students to be successful and to have greater learning and increased performance. So I give you these because I don't think anyone is going to remember every aspect of this presentation today. But if you can take away from this, students have to be seeing value in an activity, and students have to expect that they can be successful. It's a very simple formula, but if we can engender all of that into our folks, that's kind of it, right? That's kind of it across contexts. And so I would hope that you could take these heuristics and sort of put them in your back pocket on your way out the door.
Okay, everyone, look, I know it's getting late. I know it's about lunchtime. I know you're probably hungry. I hear you. We're gonna go through this and we're almost done, but hear me out. So I am really big on quotes. I love quotes and I love motivational things. That's what drives me. I'm very ambitious. I'm self-motivated, but I love me some quotes. So a couple of things that I picked up along the way is I'm a strong believer that whether you succeed or whether you fail, you don't do it on your own. A lot of times it's you in the driver's seat and you're doing it, but the relationships that you have around you, right, sustain either good practices or they help you build bad ones. And that either leads you to forward to success or it leads you to failure. So I say that to say relationships matter, right? So when we talk about intrusive advising, it's historically been applied in the context of non-traditional students and those students that have challenges that can or cannot be anticipated, right? But I encourage you to kind of expand this application to focusing on the important tenet of it, which is the relationship building, not just during the learning experience, but after the learning experience, right? So the goal is not just to get a degree typically, it's about how can I use this? The degree is typically not the end of the process. It's I have this degree, how am I going to use it? How am I going to apply it? Because as both of my professors or my advisors have said, right, is it's about that application, it's about creating value in the program, right? Creating value in the program in terms of for me as a student, if I'm going through all this work, this paper better help me out with something, right? So it's not just the paper, but it's also the people in this program. So having been in the EDD program at Vanderbilt, right, for 2.5 years, I can tell you the things that have helped me the most, the learning content's great. Don't get it twisted. I love it. I've learned a lot, right? But the things that I will walk away and I will remember the most that have impacted me the most are the conversations I've had with my peers, the networking and the connections I've made, and the relationships I've built with my professors or my advisors. I am literally here today because of intrusive advising practices. Again, I've got to reiterate, I am very self-driven. I am very ambitious. But when I was considering doing presentations, it was more so like, oh, okay, that's on my to-do list. That's on my goal list. And then I had actually Dr. Campbell be like, hey, Lynn, we have this coming up. You doing it? And I'm like, this is kind of soon. He knew what I was trying to accomplish. He knew I was trying to get into higher ed. I'm in the Army right now, right? This is like night and day. Army, higher ed, right? Potential faculty position, one day university provost, right? And he kind of guided me and tailored this advising process with him. And he understood me and knew my personality. And he basically, very respectfully, pushed me into the space, whether I was ready or not. But obviously I'm here today. And I am so grateful for that, because if had he not been proactive, had he not been intrusive, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't actually be doing the actions that I need to be to move forward in my career, which is my mid-career change, which is happening very, very soon, right? So regardless of your industry, profession, or experience, your relationships matter. They are absolutely critical to your experiences. And not one person that I've talked to in my program or who has been in higher ed and out of higher ed has ever said they regret the relationships that they have made within the program. Okay. So this right here is what the research says. There's nothing new, right? As Dr. Garner kind of hinted at before. So there is a distinction, right? There's a slight nuance between your regular academic advisors and these intrusive advising practices, right? One is typically really, really focused on the education it's the education process itself, right? So you need to take these classes. When are you available to do this? How can we adjust this, right? It's a little technical in nature. Intrusive advising practices focus on those educational milestones that you need to make, but it also focuses on you, right? And tailoring the process specifically to you. And it's not a waiting process, right? It is a proactive process. So a lot of times when we're being reactive, sometimes the damage has already been done and now we're trying to fix it. Proactive tendencies want you to be successful going into something. So it sets a very, very good path for you, anticipating challenges or anticipating needs that you're going to have along the way. And I can tell you, the difference between feeling like a human tuition payment versus feeling like an actual doctoral student has been in the way that my professors and my advisors have approached me with a distinction. Hey, Lynn, I know you're trying to make your transition out of the Army and into higher ed. Have you considered this? And I'm like, wow, no, I haven't. And I can tell you, it's an amazing thing to not regret spending very large sums of money in education and feeling that kind of value, feeling respected, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, my professors see me, they recognize me, they want to help me, they want to support me, not just so I can pass their class and do well in their class, but they actually want to set me up for success in life. And at the end of the day, is that not what you want for your students? To set them up for success while they're in your program and while they're out of your program, and then later on contribute back to the educational field, as we know is jeopardized right now in terms of especially our educators. That's the ultimate goal. So you have to create this value within the program and the way that you support your students in the program. Not everybody can do this. Not everyone has the bandwidth to do it. But my biggest encouragement is just to understand that you are an ambassador for everything that you touch and everything your student experiences. And so tailoring and personalizing that experience is really, really important to our success and in creating that value. And then the last point is that when it comes to intrusive and proactive advising, it is a relational process, not a transactional process. Transactional in the fact that if it is transactional, it stops once you complete your program or you complete your degree. Relational is that it carries out of that program and into your life and teaching them things that they can't necessarily get in a textbook or from an asynchronous material.